My wife announced that she was quitting her job to travel with her spiritual soulmate from a yoga retreat. You're a prison of misery. I want to feel alive, not pay bills with a boring nobody. She laughed, posting photos of him feeding her strawberries in Bali. I packed her bag silently. 6 days later, her sister showed up at my door, pale, shaking, and holding a blood-stained passport. My wife of 15 years came back from a yoga retreat obsessed with a guy named Zephyr who she claimed was her spiritual soulmate. A week later, she quit her job and told me she was leaving me to go find herself with him. She called me a prison of misery and posted photos of him feeding her strawberries in Bali while laughing. I packed her bags without saying a word. 6 days later, her sister showed up on my doorstep, pale, shaking, and holding a blood-stained passport. I'm not writing this for sympathy. Honestly, I don't even know why I'm writing it, other than the fact that it feels surreal, like the kind of thing that happens in books or movies, not to guys like me who live in quiet neighborhoods, pay their bills on time, and think they've got life mostly figured out. My name's Jonah. I'm 47. I live in Eugene, Oregon, in a modest two-bedroom house I once thought would grow old with us. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of habits, shared glances, private jokes, small arguments that always found their way back to peace. I'm not perfect, not by a long shot, but I was consistent. Dependable. I thought that counted for something. My wife, Callie, was always more spontaneous. Creative. She had a flair for the expressive. In our early years, she'd stay up late painting while I worked on architectural drafts. We used to joke that she brought the color, and I built the frame. Somehow it worked. Or at least, I thought it did. She started attending yoga classes at this place outside of town, the Amara Grove. A sort of retreat/workshop/wellness commune out in the woods. She said it helped with her anxiety, that it made her feel more centered. I was supportive. We didn't have kids, so we had the flexibility. I figured everyone needed something to ground them. I didn't realize what was really happening there, or maybe I didn't want to see it. At first, she just came back more energized. She'd talk about breathing techniques and how she was starting to meditate more. Then the language shifted. She spoke less about yoga and more about vibrations, soul alignment, the self beyond the body. She mentioned a man named Zephyr, said he was guiding her through energetic rebirth. I remember the first time she said his name. I was doing the dishes. She was sitting at the table, her face glowing in the sunset light, and she just said it, like it was nothing. Zephyr says I carry generational wounds in my womb chakra. I turned around and looked at her. Who's Zephyr? He's a teacher, she said, too casually. He's helping me untangle years of conditioned suffering. That was the start. From there, it escalated quickly. She started spending entire weekends at the retreat. Her phone became permanently glued to her. She began referring to our marriage in abstract terms, calling it a contract rooted in fear. Then one morning, she came into the kitchen while I was pouring coffee and just said it. I'm leaving. I didn't understand at first. Leaving for what? Leaving this. Us. All of it. I've given this 15 years and I can't breathe anymore. I want to feel alive again. Zephyr is going to Bali to lead a soul awakening journey, and I'm going with him. I just stood there, the coffee growing cold in my mug. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're a prison of misery, Jonah. I want to feel something. I don't want to spend the rest of my life splitting grocery bills with a boring nobody." She laughed. She actually laughed, then walked away humming. The next day, she posted photos on Instagram, her in a white sarong, barefoot on a beach, smiling up at Zephyr as he fed her strawberries. The caption was, "True freedom begins when you stop pretending." I didn't scream. I didn't chase her down or try to talk her out of it. I went upstairs, pulled out the suitcase, and started folding her clothes. It was a quiet, strange kind of rage. Not explosive, not dramatic, just final. I put everything in neatly, zipped it up, and left it by the front door. I remember sitting in the dark that night, staring at the space on the wall where our wedding photo had hung. I didn't cry. Not then. 6 days later, a knock came at the door. It was Mireille, Callie's younger sister. She looked like she'd aged a decade in a week. Her hair was tangled. Her hands were shaking. And in them, she held Callie's passport, smeared with what looked unmistakably like blood. "Jonah," she whispered, "something's wrong." I let her in, sat her down, and listened as she tried to explain. Callie had gone to Bali, yes, but she'd checked out of the retreat early, without Zephyr. She never told anyone why. Her last message to Mireille was a garbled voice note where she said, "I made a mistake. He's not who I thought he was. I'm scared." Then nothing. Mireille had been trying to reach her for days. She'd contacted the consulate, the local police. When they went to the last place Callie had reportedly stayed, a small guest house in Ubud, they found the room abandoned. Clothes are still there. Shoes. Her phone. And the passport. She'd vanished. No one could reach Zephyr. His real name wasn't even Zephyr. According to the retreat center's booking records, he used an alias. Paid in cash. Left no trail. The police were investigating it as a possible missing person case, maybe foul play, maybe worse. But communication was slow, and the authorities over there didn't seem too motivated. I contacted a private investigator on the island. Paid out of pocket. He started digging, and what he found made my skin crawl. The retreat wasn't just yoga. It was tied to something more esoteric: rituals, practices borrowed from half-understood Eastern mysticism and twisted into something unrecognizable. There were rumors of psychological manipulation, isolation tactics, even psychedelic drug use as part of their soul realignment practices. Callie, it seemed, had started to realize what she'd gotten into. Too late. In her room, the investigator found a small journal. Pages filled with handwriting that started off calm and lucid, then descended into frantic scrawls. She wrote about the veil thinning, about voices at night, about Zephyr showing her the truth behind the ego, and then silence. Her last entry said, "I need to get away. He's watching me sleep." I didn't sleep that night. After Mireille left, I stayed up on the couch with her passport on the coffee table in front of me, the brown stain on the cover catching the low lamp light like a silent warning. I flipped through the pages over and over, as if some hidden clue would appear the 10th or 12th time. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in years. I couldn't focus on anything but the questions spiraling in my head. What happened to her? Why did she check out early? Why did she try to leave Zephyr? And most of all, was she still out there? I gave the private investigator, Anselmo, whatever information I had: texts she'd sent me in the last few months, photos, her online activity, even her Instagram password. I wanted to believe we'd find her, that she'd just gotten scared, panicked, and disappeared for safety. But I also knew Callie. She wasn't the kind of person to go dark. She needed an audience, a voice. Silence wasn't her nature. 3 days later, Anselmo sent me a file of images he'd pulled from her Instagram drafts. Posts she never published. Some of them were selfies, taken at arm's length in strange-looking places. Dirt floors, cracked mirrors, rooms with peeling walls and unfamiliar symbols scrawled on them in red marker or chalk. In one photo, she was wearing the same white linen robe from the retreat, but her face looked off. Her eyes wide, her smile too forced. Then came the photo that broke me. It was a blurry mirror shot. Callie was standing barefoot, holding her phone up, her shoulders hunched. And behind her, reflected in the mirror, was someone else. Not Zephyr, not someone I recognized. A tall figure. Male, lean, maybe shirtless. But it wasn't just his presence that chilled me. It was the look on his face. He was staring directly at the mirror, his eyes locked on the lens like he knew exactly what she was doing. His smile wasn't right. It looked knowing, menacing, like he was waiting for something. I sent it to Anselmo. He confirmed the photo had been taken in Ubud, about 10 kilometers outside the town center. A place that didn't show up on any tourism site. No guest house listings. No reviews. He traced the image metadata and found a GPS ping, coordinates that led to a heavily forested area with barely any road access. He offered to go up there in person, but I knew he was hesitant. "This isn't normal retreat behavior," he told me. "If she gets involved with these people and they feel threatened, well, you need to prepare yourself." I wasn't sure what that meant, and I wasn't ready to ask. In the meantime, I kept searching. I logged into her old email accounts. I found dozens of messages from women she'd met through the Amara Grove. Some of them recent, some over a year old. Most were typical spiritual ramblings. But one stood out. It was from a woman named Talia, dated about 6 weeks before Callie left. The subject line: "Please be careful with him." The message was short. "I saw the way Zephyr looks at you. You remind him of someone." That's not a compliment. I don't know what he told you about his past, but none of it is true. He doesn't have soulmates. He has obsessions. If he tells you to go anywhere alone with him, don't. Get out before you can't. It was signed, Talia M., left the Grove February 11th. I searched for her name online. Nothing came up. I reached out to the retreat through their public website, just a generic contact form, but no one ever replied. When Anselmo tried to get records of Zephyr's real name through their administration, he was told that the retreat had been recently sold and that all guest instructor files had been deleted. Deleted, like he'd never existed. I sent Mireille the email from Talia. She broke down, said she remembered Callie mentioning Talia once, but only in passing. She said she left after a bad energy clearing, Mireille told me. She said Zephyr told her some people just weren't ready for the truth. Zephyr had a way of framing everything like an awakening. If you were uncomfortable, you were resisting growth. If you asked too many questions, you were spiritually blocked. He knew how to isolate people through language. It's terrifying how easily people fall into that. And maybe the worst part is, I still don't know if Callie really believed in it, or if she just didn't want to believe in me anymore. I started having dreams. Vivid, unsettling ones. In one, I was walking through the forest barefoot, calling her name. In another, she was painting again, furiously, wildly, slashing the canvas with colors I couldn't recognize. Every time I got closer, her face would shift into someone else's. Sometimes mine. Sometimes that man is in the mirror. I don't know what's real anymore. Mireille and I have stayed in touch. She checks in weekly, sometimes daily when her anxiety spikes. She started seeing a therapist. She blames herself, says she should have noticed something earlier, that she thought it was just a phase, like the time Callie went raw vegan for a year or tried silent meditation retreats. But this wasn't a phase. This was something else. Something deeper. More dangerous. It's been 2 months now since the last confirmed sighting of her. Anselmo's most recent update. The coordinates led to a burned-out structure, deep in the jungle. No signs of life. Charred remains of what might have been bedding. Candle stubs. Bones. Animal, probably. Hopefully. He found a piece of fabric in the rubble, a strip of linen that matched her robe. It was scorched around the edges, but the embroidery was still visible. A small stitched lotus. I recognized it. I remember helping her pick it out before she left. She said it made her feel pure. That word echoes in my head now. Pure. Like something to be cleansed. I keep thinking about what she wrote in her journal. That she needed to get away. That she was being watched. I wonder what she saw that made her want to leave. I wonder if she ever got the chance. After Anselmo's last update, I couldn't sit still anymore. There's only so many mornings you can wake up staring at the same empty hallway, waiting for a door to open that never will. Only so many times you can explain to coworkers why you look like heck and why your coffee stays untouched all day. I started dreaming about Callie every night. Not the good dreams, the kind where we're young again, at that first apartment with the broken radiator and takeout boxes on the floor, but the ones where she's out of reach. She'd be calling me, but her voice was muffled, like it was coming from behind glass. I'd run toward her, but my legs wouldn't move. Or worse, she'd be running too, but away from me. And just before she disappeared around some corner or into a dark forest, she'd always look back. Her expression would flicker, confused, scared, then gone. One morning, after a particularly vivid one, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time, staring. I looked older than I remembered, more gray in the beard, tired eyes. I hadn't shaved in over a week. I looked like a man who'd lost something vital and hadn't realized it until the air turned cold around him. That afternoon, I bought a ticket to Denpasar. I didn't tell anyone except Mireille, who begged me not to go alone. What if something happens to you too? She asked. What if they're watching you? She wasn't being paranoid. She was just scared. I was too. But I told her the truth. I can't not go. If I stayed, I'd rot. If I left, I might never come back. But at least I'd know I did something. The flight was long, a blur of recycled air and anxious thoughts. When I landed, the heat wrapped around me like a wet towel. Bali in October isn't kind to people who dress like it's still fall in Oregon. Anselmo met me at a roadside cafe near Ubud. He was a wiry man in his 60s, sun-worn and sharp-eyed. Ex-cop, fluent in both English and Baisa, and not the type to be rattled easily. He slid me a packet of documents, photos, witness statements, GPS maps, even grainy CCTV stills of Callie from when she first arrived. She looked fine at first, he said. Bright, excited. But there's a point where something shifts. He wasn't wrong. The photos told a quiet story. The first few times, she was beaming, smiling in crowds. Then gradually, her shoulders dropped. Her posture changed. Her eyes dulled. In the last clear shot, she was walking down a narrow road, away from a local market, barefoot, holding her shoes in one hand, her robe in the other. Her expression was blank. She went that way, Anselmo said, tapping the photo. East, toward the jungle. We drove as far as we could, then switched to a motorbike. The road narrowed until it wasn't a road anymore, just a trail, eaten up by moss and silence. The place Anselmo had found, the structure that had burned, was nothing more than a shell. For walls, barely standing. Blackened wood. The faint smell of ash still lingering, even after all this time. We stood there for a long time, just listening. No birds. No wind. Just heat and memory. I walked the perimeter, rubbed my hand along the charred edge of what might have been a door frame. In the debris, Anselmo had marked spots with chalk, one where the fabric had been found, another where he believed the fire started. Accelerant, he muttered. Deliberate, but not professional. Sloppy. The implication hung in the air. It wasn't just an accident. We hiked further that day, deeper into the jungle, guided by old notes and rumors he'd picked up from locals. Some spoke of a foreign man who'd passed through, offering spiritual cleansing. Others mentioned ceremonies. Drums at night. Smoke. Then silence. Zephyr had been here. That much was clear. At a tiny village outside Payangan, we found a man, Wayan, who claimed to have driven Zephyr and a Western woman to a remote cliffside 2 months ago. Said they asked to be dropped off before moonrise. When Anselmo showed him Callie's photo, Wayan looked away. Very sad, he said. She cried. Did you see her again? I asked. He shook his head slowly. No, only him. We asked what he meant. He came back. Alone. At dawn. No bags. I felt my throat tighten. I couldn't breathe for a moment. The image flashed in my mind. Callie, walking that trail in the dark, barefoot, not knowing where she was going. Wei-in told us he offered to drive Zephyr to town, but he refused, said he had unfinished work. Then he disappeared into the trees. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat outside the homestay we'd rented, listening to the rustle of the forest. Every now and then, I thought I heard footsteps, but it was probably just the wind, or the monkeys, or my guilt. I kept thinking about what Callie said to me that day she left. You're a prison of misery. I'd replayed that line over and over in my head for weeks. Months. I used to think it was cruel. Unfair. Now, I wasn't so sure. Maybe I had become a cage. Routine. Stability. Predictability. All things she used to crave, until they suffocated her. Maybe Zephyr gave her a kind of permission to escape. But escape into what? And at what cost? We kept searching. The next morning, Anselmo took me to a place he hadn't yet visited. Another abandoned structure, deeper in the jungle, where previous reports had hinted at gatherings. The remains of something ritualistic were still scattered across the floor. Candle wax, burned herbs. Even small mirrors hung on every wall, most of them shattered. In the center was a circle of stones. At first glance, it looked random, but it wasn't. Anselmo took photos, sent them to a contact in Jakarta. The response was quick. It was a sigil, the kind used in obscure esoteric rites, meant to shed the self, according to his source. A ritual of ego death, or, as it was more ominously described, a spiritual disappearance. That phrase stuck with me. Not death, disappearance. Like vanishing into another version of reality. One where your old life is erased. We left as the sky began to darken. On the way back, we passed a group of children playing in a stream. One of them, a girl no older than 10, stopped and looked directly at me. Then pointed. Orang Putih Hailong, she said softly. Anselmo translated. The white woman who vanished. I turned around, but she was already gone. We stayed in that region for the next 2 days, searching. Anselmo did most of the talking. I was the ghost, quiet, observing, haunted. He asked around delicately, never pressing too hard. It wasn't just about courtesy. In places like this, people don't like outsiders sniffing around too much, especially when the questions involve foreigners who vanished in the night. The more we asked about Zephyr, the more I noticed something strange. People didn't just avoid answering. They reacted like the name itself was cursed. I'd watch their eyes go flat, their posture stiffen. Some would mumble an excuse and leave the room. Others would glance at the forest, then shake their heads slowly, like to say, don't go there. It wasn't just a retreat. It wasn't just spiritual tourism gone wrong. It was something else. Anselmo had a theory. He's not working alone, he said. People like that, they build little kingdoms around themselves. He wouldn't have gotten this far without help. On the third day, we found someone who confirmed it. Her name was Dewey, early 30s, ran a roadside stall that sold tea, woven bracelets, and hand-carved idols. We stopped for water, but she surprised us by speaking in near-perfect English. She asked if we were the ones asking about the white woman. Anselmo didn't answer right away. She looked over her shoulder, then stepped around to the back of the stall and motioned for us to follow. Inside, the air smelled like ginger and smoke. The walls were lined with photographs of temples, mountain views, and tourists she'd probably met over the years. There were 2 plastic chairs. She motioned for us to sit. I saw her, Dewey said unprompted. Maybe 5 days before the fire. My pulse spiked. Where? I asked. On the path to the old garden. She was crying, but not like fear. Like confusion. Lost inside. Anselmo showed her the photo, the blurry mirror one. Dewey nodded. Yes, that's the house they used. But not just him. There were others. Mostly women. Younger. Followers. What happened to them? I asked. She hesitated. Then said, gone. We pressed her. She didn't want to say too much, but the message was clear. Whatever Zephyr was doing, it wasn't just about spiritual healing. There were rituals. A belief system twisted into something unrecognizable. Isolation. Indoctrination. And eventually, something final. Something permanent. She handed me something before we left. A necklace. It was simple, made of dark wooden beads, with a small pendant in the shape of an eye. She gave it to me, Dewey said. She said she didn't want it anymore. My throat went dry. Callie gave this to you. She nodded. She was trying to leave, but she said he'd find her. That sentence looped in my head for the rest of the night. She was trying to leave, but she said he'd find her. It was like watching a slow-motion disaster, one where the warning signs had been there all along. The shifts in her personality, the way she clung to Zephyr's every word, the strange language, the euphoric highs followed by depressive lows. I'd seen the cult-like control from a distance, but now I could feel the imprint it left behind on people. In places, even the trees here seemed quieter. Back at the homestay, Anselmo and I laid everything out. Maps, witness statements, timestamps. A timeline began to take shape. Callie had checked into the retreat in early September. Met Zephyr sometime during the first week. Within days, she was isolated from the group. By week 2, she was moved to private quarters. Week 3, she tried to leave. She contacted Mireille, then vanished. We needed more. Anselmo had a contact who could help, a former journalist who'd once done an expose on cult tourism in Southeast Asia. Her name was Ira. We met her 2 days later at a dingy bar in Seminyak, where the music was too loud and the air reeked of cigarettes. She didn't waste time. I know who he is, she said. Zephyr. Real name's Luca Rademacher. German national. He's bounced between Thailand, Nepal, Cambodia, and here for the last decade. She pulled up a photo on her phone. Same man. Same eyes. Everywhere he goes, the story's the same. Ira continued. Wellness guru. Alternative healing. Then someone disappears. I felt sick. Why hasn't he been stopped? I asked. Because it never sticks, she said. No bodies. No smoking. Victims either vanish or reappear weeks later, too disoriented to testify. And the ones who don't come back. She shrugged. No proof. She leaned in. But I've been following him. And I think this time he went too far. She showed us a grainy video taken by a drone. It hovered over a clearing deep in the forest. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Just trees, dirt, and ruins. Then she zoomed in. In the center was a circle. Stones. Mirrors. Symbols. Same as what we saw earlier. But this time, there were people. 6 figures, seated cross-legged. Robes. Motionless. And at the front, standing before them, arms raised, Zephyr. Ira tapped the screen. This was recorded 4 weeks ago. Where is this? I asked. She gave us coordinates. Remote. No road access. We'd have to hike in. I told her we were going. She didn't try to stop us. But as we left, she said something that stuck with me. Be careful, Jonah. People like him don't let go. Not of their followers. Not of their stories. And definitely not of the ones who try to break the illusion. We left at dawn. Anselmo packed light, supplies, a flashlight, a signal beacon, a shortwave radio. I brought little more than water, a copy of Callie's journal, and the necklace Dewey had given me. The coordinates led us through thick jungle, far from any path we could find on a map. The trail was a suggestion more than a road, half swallowed by roots and time. After the first hour, we stopped speaking. The silence was heavier than words. Around mid-afternoon, we reached the ridge. Below us was a clearing. There it was. The circle, the stones, the mirrors, the burned-out center. But it wasn't abandoned. There were 3 people seated in the circle, 2 women and 1 man, their backs to us, heads bowed. At the far end, facing them, was Zephyr. He hadn't changed. Same linen pants. Same smooth, predator calm posture. Arms spread wide as if inviting the sky to embrace him. We crouched behind the treeline. Anselmo raised the binoculars. No guards, he whispered. No weapons. What's he doing? Anselmo studied him. Performing. Always performing. We waited until dusk. The ceremony, or whatever it was, seemed to end. Zephyr walked toward a tent near the edge of the clearing. The others began to disperse, quietly, robotically. No talking. Just slow, obedient movement. They were lost. But we had a plan. The next morning, we returned. In town, Ira had helped us coordinate with a local advocacy group that specialized in deprogramming and rescuing people from exploitative spiritual groups. They worked closely with legal teams and local authorities, though this was the first case they'd handled this far out. Our goal wasn't confrontation. It was exposure. We set up cameras at the edge of the site, audio recorders, drones. Anselmo had even wired a hidden mic into a carved bracelet the advocacy team had crafted. We'd been gathering every scrap of intel, records of payments from victims, fake names Zephyr used, locations, drone footage, and even footage of vulnerable women participating in these disturbing rituals. But that alone wouldn't be enough. We needed Callie's story to be heard. That was the leverage. I'd spent weeks combing through her journal, trying to understand what had happened to her, how she had gone from self-assured and curious to desperate and terrified. There was one entry in particular, dated the day before she vanished, that I couldn't shake. He says I'm the chosen one, that I'm here to shed the world. But I just want to go home. I don't want to be worshipped. I don't want to disappear. I miss Jonah. I miss my old life. But I don't know how to get back. That was the break in the illusion. That's what we used. We created a dossier, photos, journal entries, videos, and turned it into a digital package, complete with a first-person narrative from her own words. With Ira's help, we sent it to every local and international outlet with a connection to spiritual tourism, yoga culture, and cult recovery. It hit within 48 hours. The reaction was immediate. People came forward. Other survivors. Former students from Nepal and Thailand. Women who had been manipulated, coerced, and emotionally broken. Some had gone home. Others were still recovering. The retreat went under investigation by Indonesian authorities, backed by international pressure. Visa records showed Zephyr had overstayed his welcome. Bank records, when traced, linked him to unreported cash transfers across borders. The final blow? A live broadcast. One of the former followers, Mai, a soft-spoken woman from Hanoi, agreed to go public. She described everything: the isolation, the drugs, the ego death rituals that bordered on psychological torture. But what broke the spell was the way she described Callie. She helped me leave, I said. She was the first to say it out loud. That this wasn't healing, it was control. She gave me her necklace. Told me, you still have your name. That means you're still you. The necklace. Callie's words. The image went viral. Callie, barefoot and haunted, handing off the symbol of her captivity and telling someone else to run. That photo, paired with the video footage, journal entries, and my statement, tore Zephyr's empire to pieces. The police moved in. Not with firearms. With paperwork. Visas revoked. Bank accounts frozen. Retreat site seized for investigation. Zephyr, Luka Rademacher, was quietly detained for visa fraud and pending charges under Indonesia's newly tightened laws regarding coercive spiritual groups. It wasn't jail time. Not yet. But it was an exile. Public disgrace. Financial ruin. He'd never run another retreat again. His name, real and fake, was now searchable across every major platform, blacklisted across the global wellness community. The mask had cracked, and the man behind it was exposed for what he was. A fraud. A parasite. And most satisfying of all, he knew it. Because in the final video footage, captured as police arrived and his disciples wandered off confused, he looked directly into the camera. Just for a second. His face fell. No mask. No charisma. Just a man realizing the performance was over. And that someone had written the final act for him. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just sat on the same couch I'd been on the night Callie left, opened my laptop, and watched the whole thing unfold. Not out of revenge. Out of release. Callie was never found. Not physically, anyway. There's a part of me that still hopes she's alive, that maybe she walked away from it all and started over somewhere. That maybe one day, I'll get a letter in the mail, no return address, just a line or two in her handwriting. I'm safe. I remember now. But even if I don't, I know this much: he didn't win. He doesn't get to erase her. She existed. She fought. And in the end, her voice is what destroyed him.